when I am having the hardest time doing something for someone else, whether it's my loved ones or a total stranger, it triggers something in our minds. It's kind of like having a quick sip of orange juice. It's like a natural stimulant. It automatically increases serotonin and dopamine to the brain. Hello and good morning, and welcome to In the Know with KO. I'm your host, Kristen Adams, also known as KO. Grab a cup of whatever makes you happy and get ready to dive into a very deep subject today. So today I am going to share how to get control of your emotions after PTSD. And I know this is a really super sensitive subject, and I'm going to do the best I can to speak from the heart. Again, these are opinions and considered entertainment because it's a podcast, but these are things that are truly from my own experiences that I hope will not only enlighten you, but inspire you and lift you up. So today, I want to get an understanding of PTSD and its impact. So let's talk a little bit about what happens to your brain and your body during PTSD. So there are some common triggers, and the way that they manifest both emotionally and physically is completely different. I am a firm believer that the trauma we experience, the emotions we experience, whatever it is that caused you to have PTSD, it's different. There is no one size fits all for what happened to us, how it happened to us, how we respond to it, and how we treat it. Okay, so let me just be clear about that. And this is a judgment-free podcast. This is simply me sharing and you listening and hopefully working together to gain additional knowledge and inspire one another. So for me, I've experienced so much in the grief department, and I've navigated some hardships. I've addressed a series of challenging relationships in my life. All of those coming together have caused me to have PTSD, and I've even battled depression. And the way I choose to battle and deal with it is actually, it's considered a holistic approach. And I know some people are not really keen on what that means. They think that I'm just, I'm sitting in a circle with other people and, smoking herbs and dropping oil on my head. I'm not quite sure if that's what you think that is, but it's not. A holistic approach is, it's non-pharmaceutical, first of all, and it's toxin-free, meaning, for me, it's being healthy. It's also, it's a mindset. And the therapy that I go to, it doesn't involve hypnosis, but it involves bringing both sides of my brain together at the same time. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. This is not in any way meant to downplay if you do require pharmaceutical involvement, whatever it is, to keep yourself alive, healthy, functioning. Again, what works for you is exactly what you need for your journey. I'm sharing mine in the hopes that maybe people have unanswered questions about things, or maybe you're looking for new and different ideas on how to manage your own situations. 100% my goal in bringing you in the know today on PTSD. For me, practical techniques like grounding exercises, breath work, mindfulness, combined with healthy eating and therapy is exactly what works. And therapeutic options that have worked for me are EMDR, not just traditional talk therapy with an actual therapist. And I think that's great. I think that, if you have the ability to get into a room with someone and express things, or even just meet up with a friend who you think is a good listener that you can trust, getting things out is the first step, because you have to acknowledge what happened to you. Okay? Keeping it bottled up inside or feeling shame is probably one of the worst parts about PTSD on any level. And I've experienced it. I've experienced shame on many levels. I've experienced fear and just grief on levels that were literally paralyzing to me. Now, let me go back to something I just expressed, that I go to EMDR for therapy. It's eye movement desensitizing and reprocessing. And what that does is it gives you the ability to be in a quiet, private, safe place, monitored by a professional that is trained, highly trained. And they have different devices that they use to help you tap into both sides of your brain. You walk through those difficult times, no matter what they are, whether you served our country in the military or you witnessed a car accident, you were in a car accident, you were in an abusive relationship, whatever it is. There are many ways people can arrive to a diagnosis of PTSD. And honestly, I didn't even know that that was my issue. My mom passed away in 2017. 3 years later, my dad died unexpectedly. And then COVID hit, and then we're, cooped up in the house, and I'm literally forced to have to face my emotions and not do what I usually do, which is get out in the world, go to the beach, take a bike ride, maybe go shopping, meet up with a friend. I wasn't able to do any of the things that I would typically go to. So now I'm finding myself each day feeling worse and worse and not even realizing it. And my husband was like, "Man, I'm kind of worried. You're really disconnected. You're not yourself." And I'm the type of person, I wear my heart on my sleeve, and if I'm happy, you know it, and if I'm not, you really know it. And I kind of like that about me, but it's also difficult because I have to explain myself, right? So the EMDR walks you through those difficult times, and it helps you to reprocess it in a better way so that you can think about it, feel it, talk about it without it paralyzing you, without it bringing you down that dark place again. And it just helps you face it, because this is my opinion of some of the pharmaceutical controls that people have when they face things like this. You're taking the medication to make you feel better, but you're never dealing with what actually made you feel that way, and you're not learning any coping skills. You're not learning anything about how to manage what you're feeling, right? I think it's important that you address it, and I think it's great if people are taking medication and it makes them feel better. But my hope for them, and if you're listening, I hope this is for you, find a way to obtain therapy, whatever that looks like for you, so you can figure out how to cope with it, walk through it, and maybe step away from that medication, because that's ultimately better for you long term. It's better for your body. It's better for your mind. So we also heal through self-compassion. I always talk about how I think it's important to be compassionate to other people. We don't know their stories, but we got to be compassionate to ourselves. Be kind to yourself. Sometimes there's days when I'm just back to back, whether it's the kids, work, a nonprofit that I'm supporting, whatever it is that I have going on. Sometimes it's back to back and it's like, oh my gosh, this is like constant. I don't know how I'm going to get through this. And then there's other times where maybe my calendar is wide open and I am forced to feel. And I know that's a harder step for many of us to face, but there's so many resources out there. And again, I am not a professional. I am not here to give advice on anything. I'm just telling you about my journey and what's worked for me in the hopes of getting you in the right path to find something that works for you. So being kind to yourself is important, because sometimes you got to just be like, you know what? It's okay to have a day off. It's okay to go hit some golf balls or take a walk or treat yourself to a new outfit, go shopping, I don't know, whatever that looks like, or take a quick trip, whatever you need to do for you. Okay. And the role of functional medicine in PTSD recovery, I got to tell you, it's been a game changer for me. It's also something you have to educate yourself on, right? I mean, I think we put a lot of faith and trust in doctors and medical organizations and books and podcasts and all these things. But are we really doing the research to find out if it's the best thing for us? Like I said, there is no one size fits all. It's kind of like when you go to a store or in a mall, right? And you see this really hot outfit on a mannequin. You're like, man, that is a smoking outfit. I want that outfit. And then you try it on. You're like, wow, I look like a couch with a head with a dress on. Okay. Like, this doesn't look anything like that mannequin. Well, that's because I'm not the mannequin, okay? And I feel like trauma, PTSD, therapy, medicine, whatever you're using, it's kind of the same thing, okay? or if you see somebody with a certain haircut and you want that same haircut, it may not look as good on you, right? I mean, this is the way it is. Again, the comparison game. We can't get all wrapped up into that. The role of functional medicine, though, is huge because it's the connection between your gut health, your hormones, and emotional regulation. I got to tell you, these are things that I have really done extensive research on for myself and for my family. And when I reset my gut and I balanced my hormones and I regulated my emotions, guess what? Life is good. Do I have those things still going on? Yeah, I do. But you know what? I'm able to manage them a lot better. If you're a mountain climber and you think you're going to climb a mountain with limited resources and supplies, it's going to be a lot harder than if you have a backpack full of stuff and you're hydrated and you've got protein bars and you have the right equipment and the shoes and the training. And, you have to be prepared. And life is no different. Okay. So dealing with grief and hardships, I feel like I can probably do 10 more episodes just on those two topics. So I'm going to try my best to share some nuggets of information. The journey through grief is not linear, okay? Understanding that grief doesn't follow a timeline and it doesn't even have specific stages. I don't care what you've read, okay? Because I've gone through those stages and then sometimes I could go 2 years without any issue and then all of a sudden, bam. I could be at a grocery store and I hear a song and it literally takes me right back to a super painful moment, ruins my day. But this is where emotional regulation and coping skills have helped me because I have a go-to now. I have a safe place in my mind, a safe place in my heart, and a healthy place in my gut. I know how to get there now, okay? So recognizing grief in all of its forms, whether it's the loss of a loved one, a loss of a dream, loss of your health, whatever it is, these are things that we have to grieve. Relationships even ending, whether it's a divorce, a friendship, a family member, it's still something that we have to process, whether the other person's involved in it still or not. You still have to process it. And that's what all of these things encompass. Again, you know your own self better than anybody else. So turning pain into purpose is something that has helped me tremendously. I find when I am having the hardest time, doing something for someone else, whether it's my loved ones or a total stranger, it triggers something in our minds. It's kind of like having a quick sip of orange juice. It's like a natural stimulant. It automatically increases serotonin and dopamine to the brain. Orange juice, okay? Good orange juice. I'm not talking Minute Maid out of a can. I'm talking good, fresh squeezed, organic orange juice, okay? With the way nature intended, nothing added. But doing something nice for someone, if I'm having a bad day, I literally cannot be upset if I'm doing something nice for someone else. It's kind of like trying to sneeze with your eyes open. It's impossible. You can't do it, right? You're trying it right now. I know it. So turning pain into purpose has helped me because there are inspiring stories of individuals who have transformed grief into advocacy or creative expression. When my mom passed away, within a few weeks, I actually jumped right in. I created a nonprofit. I love the story that my mom had as such a successful woman in business, creating a career from nothing. My mom cleaned houses, and her first job was part-time as a bookkeeper, no college education, making $5 an hour. And you know what? She figured out how to turn that into a full-blown career that was so super successful for over 20 years. Nothing but respect for that. And I saw the way she treated herself, her coworkers, and all of her staff. And I used that same experience that she led with. But I also used that when she passed away as her legacy. And it was a way for me to walk through that grief, taking her success and her stories and sharing them with other people. And I focused mostly on young women, high school age, and actually created a scholarship fund. And we were very successful with this for 5 years in the local community of Boca Raton, Florida, in the public high schools. And I offered scholarships to students that were making a difference in the lives of others. I was like, you know what? Kids that are on the honor roll and graduating with honors, they don't need my help. They're going to already get their scholarships. I was looking for the student that maybe wasn't on the honor roll, but they were trying their best and they were leading by example. They were rising above the influence of others. And you know what? It got me through the hardest time of losing my mom. And it also made me happy that she was a part of my everyday. And I'm not saying that every time somebody in your life passes away, you have to go start a nonprofit. That is not what I'm saying. You can find a way to honor someone privately. You don't even have to do it publicly. This is just what worked for me. I'm a talker. I'm out in the community. I love networking, and this is what worked for me. It also gave me the ability to do something with my oldest son, who was in high school at the time. We started the scholarship fund at his high school. So that was a starting point for me, and then it rippled out from there. It also gave me the ability to get into the schools and teach and share some of those stories of inspiration and help them grow. And so again, it was feeding my soul, it was feeding my emotions, helping me cope and helping me to regulate. So another way that you can turn that hardship into something good is through personal growth and personal resilience. You know, sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit by measuring up against other people. Well, those people aren't you, okay? You are you, and you're the only you in the whole wide world, all right? And that is a fact. I don't have to be a scientist to know that. And the sooner you recognize that, the sooner you'll be pleased maybe with some of the things that you're accomplishing and accept the things that you're not. So the intersection of grief and health is how unprocessed grief can really affect your physical health. You know, the feeling of grief can be overwhelming. And there are times when we want to just stay in bed and pull the covers up over our heads. And for me, sometimes that was just not an option. You know, I am married, having kids, dogs, house, multiple businesses was not an option. I had to get up. But what I would do is during those dark times, I would get up for them. And then when everybody was gone and I was left to myself, I had to face it. I had to figure it out. And it wasn't always easy. And I would beat myself up about the things that I wasn't doing. And I would beat myself up about all the things I was feeling, not realizing also I was dragging myself down physically. My gut health was completely disrupted. This also happened when I was in previous relationships that were also unhealthy. And I certainly had a role to play, but because I wasn't dealing with them, I was just battling them on a regular basis and not dealing with them, facing them, or finding a way to get them behind me. It disrupted my body physically. Aches, pains, you know, all of the things that we feel directly affect our physical health. And that's why it feels hard to get up out of bed in the morning. You're hurting. You're also not healthy from the inside out. And if you find a way for self-care through health, nutrition, exercise, therapy, whatever it is, you will start to feel better. You will create better, healthier habits. And you'll also start to feel better about yourself, and you can be kinder to yourself. Support systems, finding your circle, super critical. You know, my circle has gotten smaller, but it's gotten more powerful. And, you know, building that circle and leaning on your community during grief and hardships is huge, because what you find is that you're not alone. Every time I share any of my hard stories, whether it's surviving being abused by my boyfriend, you know, when I was a teenager, I was physically and emotionally beat up, and I got over it. I was bullied in high school. I ended up dropping out. I got over it. I'm divorced. That relationship wasn't horrible. We became friends, but I still had to grieve it. I still had to get through it. It was still hard, but thankfully it worked out. My ex-husband's a great friend. I just talked to him a few days ago. You know, we successfully raised an incredible young man. Shout out to Dylan. But you know what? Those were all choices. And by having a network and having support systems and talking about those things, I wasn't alone. And I was able to share the good and the bad, right? And the ugly. And every time I shared it, every single time, 100%, there was at least one other person was like, oh my gosh, me too. Oh my gosh, my sister. Oh my gosh, my neighbor, my mom, my brother. Like, it's important to share those stories, because when we realize we're not alone, you're not isolated, and you beat yourself up a lot less because you're like, oh, they went through that too? Oh, I love that person. Oh, they're so awesome. So Navigating those feelings of isolation when other people don't understand your pain helps when you share it, because maybe the person you're talking to, maybe they can't empathize. Maybe they've never been through that. And I understand, because until I walked through certain situations, I couldn't offer empathy to anybody either. But even if they can't empathize, chances are they can sympathize. Chances are they know someone else, and maybe they're like, oh, I've never been through that, but my sister has, and I remember, this, and this. So challenging relationships sometimes can be a little harder to overcome, because setting boundaries without guilt is not an easy thing to do. We often feel guilty because we're afraid we're going to hurt someone's feelings, or say it the wrong way, or ruin the relationship. Like, these are all things that are risky. But you know what? We cannot control other people. We can only control ourselves and how we respond to those people. So boundaries are necessary for emotional health, and you have to set them effectively, right? You have to really think about, what are you trying to accomplish and why? And that will sometimes help. And I write it out and I talk it out, and maybe I seek advice from other people that I love and trust. And I'm going to tell you right now, something that I have been training our older two kids: be careful when seeking advice, guys. You can't get advice from someone who isn't modeling the life or behavior that you want to have in your own life or behavior. So just be careful, okay? Recognizing and breaking free from toxic patterns is probably one of the hardest things, especially when you have to have that difficult conversation with family, partners, or friends. Recognizing what's not working is hard, because in some way you're accepting your own defeat, and you're accepting this relationship may come to an end. That's hard. Also, recognizing that something is toxic is hard, because there's shame connected to that. It took me probably over 20 years before I really openly shared a lot about my experiences when I was with a guy. He was older than me. He was really horrible to me. And, I don't know, maybe I just brought out the worst in him. Maybe I triggered him. Maybe it was something that he learned in his own family. I'm not even sure. But you know what? I'm not going to dwell on what brought him to that horrible place. I'm going to dwell on myself. And healing myself is what I had to make my priority. And I'm definitely not alone, sadly. Way too many women and men, I'm sure, go through that. So recognizing it and breaking free from it, but also having those boundaries, okay? Steps in rebuilding self-esteem when you leave a toxic relationship or you set boundaries in toxic relationships, it takes time. You got to be easy on yourself, and you have to be easy on the other person too, because you're forcing a change on them that maybe they didn't ask for. And healing a relationship after trauma, sometimes it involves rebuilding trust. Sometimes it's an intimacy with trauma that's impacted the relationship. So again, there's no one size fits all, but you have to look at all sides of it. Again, you only have control of yourself, but if you look at all sides of it and you communicate with the other person, if it's possible. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's got to be just a fast break, run the other direction, and never look back. And that might be what's best, okay? That's what was best in my case. It took some time. It took a lot of courage. Breaking off that relationship for me was 100% fear-based. And you know what? It compromised every other relationship in my life. It compromised my relationship with my family, my closest friends, even a different boyfriend that I was seeking a relationship with that I totally loved at the time. It compromised everything because I wasn't healed, and it was interrupting everything in such a super unhealthy, negative, and dark way. I had no coping skills at that time. I had no resources. I had nothing. I had no boundaries. I had nothing except dealing with what was done to me and trying to figure out, what did I do to deserve this, right? And the bottom line is, I did nothing to deserve that. So the power of forgiveness includes self-forgiveness. I had to forgive myself for the part that I had to play in all of my failed relationships, right? And then I had the ability at that point to forgive the other person. And forgiveness doesn't mean excusing harmful behavior. It's literally not what that means. All it means by forgiving someone, it's releasing yourself from the resentment. Resentment is so unhealthy. It happens. I mean, every one of us has experienced this, I'm sure. Exercise for self-forgiveness is when your past choices weigh so heavy, you got to let them go. Okay. You know, ships can't sail if the anchor's still dropped in the ocean, right? You've got to pull that anchor up, put it back in your ship, and leave the dock. Okay. And at whatever speed, in whatever direction you choose. But at some point, you gotta pull the anchor back in and control your ship. So whether you're looking for a therapist, a trauma coach, functional medicine practitioner, real life stories with other people and just sharing is what I hope you are in the know about today. And, I know I shared a lot of information and maybe you'll have to listen to it another time, but I hope you did gain knowledge and love for yourself to get those boundaries and get that healing because life is short. We got to make the best of it. Thank you for listening. And don't forget, please share this podcast with someone else who can benefit. Share it with someone you love. And please don't forget to offer 5 stars as a great review and maybe even drop a happy comment about what you enjoyed about the show. Thank you for listening and have a great day.